Welcome to InsectTech's Ethical Hacking course videos. Module Denial of Service. In this video, we'll look at Introduction to Denial of Service attacks. What is DOS and DDoS? What are the types of denial of service attacks? Attacking web servers with denial of service attacks using Backtrack operating system. And finally, couple of prevention techniques to mitigate DOS attacks. Now, a denial of service attack is an attempt to make a machine or network resource unavailable to its intended users. The intent of this denial of service attack is to overwhelm the targeted victim with a tremendous amount of fake traffic so that the victim becomes not available for its legitimate users, since it is processing the fake traffic. Distributed denial of service attack comes into picture when an attacker compromises several systems and launches DOS attack on a specific target from all the compromised systems. If a denial of service attack originates from multiple source addresses, it is known as DDoS. Typically, in a denial of service attack, the source IP is spoofed. In a distributed denial of service attack, it may or may not. It can use the addresses of zombies, which are the compromised systems by the attacker. This is the pictorial representation of distributed denial of service attack, where he is the attacker. This is the attacker's machine, which has compromised 4 zombies. Now these 4 systems are in the control of this attacker, and this attacker is trying to attack this target server using these 4 compromised systems. So this is how distributed denial of service attack works. Now let us try to understand what are the types of denial of service attacks. Though there are several types of denial of service attacks, I have taken 3 types of attacks to give a brief understanding of what are the methodologies that are being followed by the attackers in denial of service attacks. So we'll go in depth into these 3 attacks, and then we'll have a simple demonstration of how we can perform denial of service attacks on servers. The first one is SYN-FLED. But before understanding this SYN-FLEDing attack, we need to understand three-way handshake. In a typical TCP/IP protocol, 2 hosts will communicate using three-way handshake. That is, the client will first send a SYN packet, and to the SYN packet the host will respond with this SYN-ACK packet, and finally the client will complete the establishment of this communication by sending this ACK packet to the host. Now this is how three-way handshake works. But in a SYN-FLEDing attack, what an attacker will do is he will try to send several SYN packets to the host via some spoofed IP address, which is basically a bad or dead IP address which doesn't exist. Then the host replies with SYN-ACK packet, and host will wait for the ACK packet. Since the IP address doesn't exist, it keeps waiting, thus it queues up and eats the system resources, and the memory buffer of the victim will eventually be filled. Once this buffer is full, the host can no longer process new TCP connection requests, and thus causes the server to crash. So this is how SYN-FLEDing attack works. Now we have another variant of denial of service attack, which is Smurf attack. In this attack, attacker first generates a ping stream to a network broadcast address with a spoofed source IP address, which is typically set to victim's host. and every host on the ping target network will generate a ping reply stream towards the victim host. The amplified ping reply stream will easily take down the victim's network connection. This is the idea behind this SMOF attack. Now let us have a pictorial representation of the same SMOF attack. Here an attacker is sending ICMP request to the network's broadcast address, which is 171.1.255.255 of a router. This is actually of a router which is configured to relay ICMP to all devices behind this router. The attacker spoofs the source of ICMP request to be the IP address of the intended victim. In our case, the source IP address is spoofed with this 200.1.1.1, which is actually the victim's IP address. Now the idea here is, since the ICMP doesn't include a handshake, the destination has no way of verifying the source IP, whether it is legitimate or not. So the router receives the request and passes it to all the devices that sits behind the router. Now all these devices then respond back to this ping request. Thus an attacker is able to amplify the attack by a multiple however many devices that are behind the router. In our case, we have 3 devices behind the router, so the attacker is able to amplify the attack by 3 times. And the remediation to this particular attack is very simple. Since the router is relaying the ICMP request, this attack is actually happening. So the remediation is, network administrators should not configure their routers to relay their ICMP requests sent to a network's broadcast address specifically. So this is how a SMOF attack works. Now we have one more variant of denial of service attacks, that is teardrop attacks. This teardrop attack is an operating system specific denial of service attack. If an attacker finds the type of operating system along with the IP address and port number of a target, and if the operating system he found is vulnerable to this teardrop attack, then an attacker will launch this attack against the system. This attack affects some specific operating systems like Windows 3.195 and NT, and also Linux 2.0.32 and Linux 2.1.63. These are the operating systems that are affected with this teardrop attacks. Now how this attack works? This attack actually exploits the reassembly of fragmented IP packets. When an IP packet is passed from one system to another, it is broken down into smaller fragments, and then in the receiving host they are again reassembled. These packets will have an offset field, as we have displayed in the figure here, fragment offset. This will be actually be in the IP header part, and it specifies the range of the data that it is carrying. And during the reassembly, if the offset field values are overlapped, then the receiving host will not be able to reassemble them and the system crashes. This is the idea behind this teardrop attack. Now let us have a clear understanding of how this attack actually works. Now one host sent an IP packet, and this IP packet has been fragmented into 2 packets. This is the first one and this is the second fragment. In this example, the second fragment is supposed to begin at 821. Since the length of the first fragment is 820, the second fragment is supposed to begin at 821, but it is beginning 20 bytes earlier. Since the offset of fragment 2 is not in accord with the packet length of the fragment 1, this discrepancy can cause some systems which cannot handle the situation to crash during the reassembly attempt. So this is how teardrop attack works.